Just a quick rundown. Yes, I am a founder and a CEO of a company called Dragonfly Technologies. We are very much knee-deep in cybersecurity. We play across the whole surface from risk mitigation, identifying threats, attack surfaces, dealing with adversaries, dealing with ransomware, helping boards and organisations understand how they can, fortify themselves and educate their employees to be prepared before, during and after. So I'm pretty sure you're all aware, cybersecurity is no longer a Dungeons and Dragons sort of exercise. It is now very real. It has real commercial impact, and he's on the board of every ASX listed company as their #1 strategy against risk that they face alongside of other commercial risks, which is very, very new. So I should also rightly point out, as Stephen pointed out, my other role alongside of working as the CEO and founder of Dragonfly is basically being in a voluntary role with ASA. So ASA is the Australian Information Security Association. It's about 20 years, actually it's 20 years this year, and basically it's the peak information security body for professionals in cybersecurity. We have branches all over Australia in every major capital city, and in general what its purpose is to unite and unite and build a robust cybersecurity sector. So we have presentations monthly, and we have an annual conference that we hold once a year with very big names from overseas and abroad to assist with that. So if you're interested, it's a very cross-board group of individuals. It's not just cybersecurity professionals. We have lawyers, we have data scientists, we have blockchain. Anything it's interesting in the cybersecurity space, because it does touch on a lot of different people and ideas in the real world. It's a very interesting area to come along. So today I want to kind of present to you, I'll probably do a bit of spiel about ASA. I'll quickly run through 1 or 2 slides that kind of backs that up. But I wanted to present to you pretty much not a deep dive into the dark underworld of hacking or cybersecurity or the hoodie image that most people associate with cybersecurity, because that's changing. What I've got here is basically, it's 50 slides, but we're going to go through it really quickly. It's a broad presentation that I present to boards. So usually those that have very little understanding around the problem or the risk, but are actually at the end of the day legally and fiscally responsible for ensuring that they're adequately protected inside their organisations against cybersecurity. People see it a little bit unclearly, and by the end of the session they're kind of taking it from a new perspective, which is what we want to do. We want to raise that awareness of how important cybersecurity is inside those organisations. So those dot points there are basically the key things that any organisation faces as an issue, and I'll talk through those each. Now, I don't have to kind of go to that plan, we can go along that plan, but if you guys want to stop me on any point or towards the end, ask any questions or talk to me about the industry or what I can probably foresee or what are some of the areas that are an issue for our industry, I'm happy to take those on as well. So we'll start with this and then we'll see where we go from there. Okay, so touching on that, it's 3,000 plus strong membership base. We have annual conferences. This is this year's conference in October. It's in Melbourne, so unfortunately Sydney get the kind of ugly end of the stick on that one because we have to fly and find accommodation. But it does flip-flop, so it does happen in Sydney and it does happen in Melbourne. They're predominantly 2 major capital cities that have the most membership, so we do have that. Some of those names are like, kind of celebrities in cybersecurity space. Bruce Schneier is the kind of lead guru on encryption technology. Anything you want to, if you go to Bruce Schneier's blog, you will find anything and anything on cybersecurity. A lot of people worship this guy and follow his blog quite closely. Dr. Karl Krasniqi, you know him, is quite popular. I don't know if you've been around in Triple J days when he used to have a radio show where he'd ring up and he'd kind of answer all these observed and quirky questions. James O'Loughlin, we know he's a celebrity. Brian Krebs, anyone know Brian Krebs? So he is a journalist who started out working in the Washington Post many years ago. He was hit with a virus, as you do back in those days in the 80s, and he got very intrigued by it, so he wanted to study and understand how that basically came onto his machine and why it affected him. He's basically the leading authority on understanding and discovering and investigating undisclosed threats. So if you've heard of the Target breach, it was about 350 million people, PCI credit card data was stolen. He was the one that uncovered that. He was the one that talked to the underground hackers. He was the one that collected the investigative journalism around that. So anyone that wants to kind of stay abreast of what he might be working on and what's coming up, follow this individual. And Kevin Mitnick, no one knows this guy. So he is basically the first person that was arrested for hacking in the US by the FBI. So they're kind of like the mixture of people that are going to come to the conference and talk at this event to give us their insights and share some of their wisdom around cybersecurity and all things in general. I guess member benefits. Universities do get through membership as an ASA associate. I believe Macquarie University will be coming into the fold in that pretty soon. CISP is one of the certifications. SANS, if you've ever heard of SANS training, the monthly events, the conference. We have a cloud branch, which is basically you can just tune in and listen to regular events on the cloud forum, and a jobs board and around that industry feeds. So I'm not going to hop too much on that. That's the ASA spiel. So giving you a bit of background around that and basically my role outside of Dragonfly. From here on in, it's basically about why is security important. Why is security important to anyone? Like, why is it important to you, your mum, your dad, your dog, your cat, all the sorts of people? Why is it important? And why is there value in security? Why is there value in data? And so why is it important? Because it's all around us, like everywhere. You can picture it in any one of those icons there, from banking to parties, to shopping, to e-commerce, to birthday parties, to healthcare, to email. It's anywhere and everywhere. Everything we do, everything we touch has got a point of data that's important to somebody somewhere that they can use. And the absolute root cause of any kind of breach or anything is because you are the target. You individually are the target. You and your data. So you generate the data, hence you are the target to get to that data. So if we're the target and we're the data, what do we do to make sure that we're secure and that we do the right things so that we're not actually becoming victims of cybercrime or identity theft? Because predominantly that's the end game. And things that we kind of see in the corporate world, this looks like a website, but it's actually just a PowerPoint slide. So you can kind of doctor up things to look real and convince people to click on them or do actions that are going to either download malicious malware or take you to a malicious website where it takes control of your machine. So they're the things that it's very hard to discern nowadays or differentiate between what is actually a real site to what is something that is absolutely fake and has the intention to target you and for your data. Always, every cyber presentation, if you go to more of these after this one, talk about what's the impact in numbers, right? So, we're talking about, this is an interesting one, 101 known days. So someone would have attacked an organization and it's not going to be until 191 days have passed that someone goes, oh, we've been attacked, because they've been sitting in there doing stuff and they're unknown to the corporate organization. There used to be about a year ago, that statistic was hovering around 230 or 270. So what that means is that it's actually having an impact. All these things we're doing and talking about in our industry to kind of tighten our controls or educate our users and educate our staff and employees, it actually is having a differentiator. And so there's financial impact. If you're breached, organisations are paying on average around about $3.6 million per data breach. So if you get an email saying reset your password, and this is Australian companies, if you reset your password, those sort of things, that cleanup for that organisation when they go through media, lawyers, arbitration, rework, standing up, and reputational loss, which you can't even put a number on, it's a very different sort of area, is kind of sitting around $3.6 million. And like in the last, these numbers, 2017, 2018, 1.9 billion records have been kind of stolen or disclosed with sensitive data. I think that was like, if you divide that by the country of the population of Australia, it's like 10 or 20, I don't know, my maths is not great here, but it's like you personally being breached 20, 30 times if you look at 1.9 billion across the population of Australia. That's a quick and dirty sort of slide around what does that look like. Well, that's that reputational aspect, right? So every time an organisation is breached, you lose more and more confidence. One organisation that isn't there anymore, obviously MySpace, but that's just probably a generational shift to Facebook, etc. But Yahoo, I mean, they have been breached a number of times. They were recently sold, and their actual breaches during the sale negotiation and after, dramatically affected their sale price. So even just this whole impact of being breached, you're losing customer confidence and customer trust in your brand, and that's what businesses and marketing and all these sorts of groups try to, and all the hard work that you do as an individual inside your organisation, you try to attract and retain, right? Is that excellence in service or customer value and your reputation, and it just takes a data breach, and that's kind of quickly eroded. Now we're becoming quite numb by a number of data breaches where we're just kind of ignoring them a little bit, and that's a fatigue situation. So you guys have all probably got iCloud, maybe half down the middle or 70-30. It's been breached so many times, people have stopped caring because you just keep going. These are sizes of breaches. There's a URL down there, I can share it with Stephen, but there's a live website that you can go to and you can plug in different years and different industries and so forth, and they'll show you the mass and the size of the data breach in terms of the impact it had on the organisation. There's really big bubbles there, quite massive. Equifax is the most recent one. That was recently fined $600 million. That came out in the news just last week. And that equated to, because of the size of that company, about $4 per individual. So Equifax do credit checking. So if you've got a credit card, they check the value of a credit card, you've got good credit rating, etc. Lots of organisations there. You can actually even go online and you can go to these websites called, there's a website there, it's called Shodan, S-H-O-D-I-N. And basically you can find vulnerabilities that you could attack. You could hire hackers for measly sums of $30 to $60. If you got someone you don't like, you can do a denial of service attack against them for about $100. It's all available for everyone to consume out there. And the thing is the attack model, or the threat actors and the adversaries are in business. So they've put logistics around everything that they do. So they've put up websites with plans that you can purchase, that you can sign up for, that you can enroll in, that you can download repositories of how to, and all that's available because they're commercializing their own craft and making it available for everyone out there. The bad news is that the more they do that, the more that spreads out and the more anyone can pick that up and start attacking that. So you don't need, like they always talk about sophisticated attack, and we all kind of, in the cyber industry go, sophisticated, right, okay, someone let the door open, right? That's not the sophistication level. We're not that sophisticated. We're not talking about things there where NSA might be involved and China might be involved in state threat actor sort of scenarios. In our community, in universities, a number of universities are hacked, student data is hacked and out there quite often. I read about it in the news quite often. But it's basically, it's available to anyone and anyone who's got a credit card. And again, how would you trust your credit card with the individual? You have to get a stolen credit card to purchase the credit card service. This is an aspect which is sort of like a form of hacking, but it's not hacking. We're all kind of familiar with the term social engineering. Anyone kind of get that idea? All right, okay, well, this is good. If I'm getting no's, this is good because this makes this pretty relevant. So social engineering it's basically, I call it an art because they're using your psychology to make you feel inquisitive or to question or to click on a link, or they're using an event like an earthquake or a wedding or the Olympics, or the 1 year I was coming up here, 1 year there's Tokyo Olympics, to kind of bait you into clicking on that link, and they're exploiting your human psychology. And the issue that you have there is it's very difficult to decipher which one is a real link and which one is kind of fake. And Facebook was a kind of social engineering, but they weren't after getting your bank records or getting you access to your bank account. So it's an art, and it's about art of gaining access. So if it's an art, we can't put a science around stopping it. So all we can really say is, how can we be aware of it? How can we prevent it? What are some signals to us that make it feel that it might be a bit funny and maybe we shouldn't go down that path in terms of that? Nothing like this wouldn't be complete without Dilbert. And yeah, it gets the people that are less kind of watching what's going on and just clicking and going and clicking and going. And that's a clicking thing, is the phishing, where you're going through the emails and they're getting you that way. And I'll talk about that. And that's why it's successful, because some people are just happy to follow what's in front of them. It's unfortunate though, we have to be that cautious. And it doesn't prevent me from, like there's a spectrum of security people. There are some that are very tin hat and aluminium foil and that will not even enter or click a website, and there are others that are a little bit too loose and too liberal with how they connect to dark webs and internets. I'm somewhere in the middle. I mean, we have to kind of coexist in this society. We have to be visible. We have to socially engage on social media like LinkedIn and Facebook and things like that, because that's the way the modern world works. It's all changed. So this is a real live email that was, and this is the art and how crafty they get, where it started out as, are you in the office? So the scenario here is you have a managing director and you have a financial officer or financial controller, always interchanging emails, and they'll always be approving payment, like pay 50,000, pay that supplier, pay this supplier, pay that supplier. Someone had hacked this computer network and had worked out that they could impersonate the MD. And it was very simple to do. They could spoof the email address to make it look like it came from the MD. And they could also just attach the signature at the bottom, which is kind of like your signal, go, yeah, it's valid because the signature looks real, it's in green, you know, his phone number's there, etc. And this one was caught out just by serendipity. There was no control or anything like that. So are you in the office? This financial controller works part-time, so she's from home 2 days and 3 days she's in the office. And it was an exchange between them where they just said, can you just transfer $50,000 to this offshore bank account? And immediately that sparked the alert to the MD, because the bank account, they don't do offshore. All right. So if they'd have done local and said, can you just transfer it to this bank account, here's the details, BSB account number, CBA, they would have lost $50,000 out of that organisation. Now, that's a lot of money for an organisation that's probably employing 5-6 people, right? It's not a mega organisation like CBA or Telstra or Optus. They're not immune. You've got your large utility companies like Ausgrid, Origin Energy, your large airlines like Qantas, Jetstar, same sort of brand, Virgin. They're seeing these and their staff are hit by these, but they're not 50,000, they're millions of dollars. And they're going out the door and they're not getting them back, because once that money leaves and hits that account, there's no way to repatriate that money. So it's very hard. I mean, how do you kind of discern what it is from that? But that was a wake-up call, because then they said, well, let's put a process in place that I don't just flick your emails to kind of just approve money to transfer to bank accounts. So some things work out for the better. Luckily, they didn't have to pay a big price around that. And basically this is a breakdown. So they call that spear phishing. So spear phishing by nature of a spear is very targeted, it's very purposeful, it's very well engineered, and has a very specific and well crafted outcome. And the intention of that was to get $50,000 from them, transfer money, con you into clicking a link. And they started to socially interact with the attacker, because the attacker was able to siphon off the actual financial controller's money to a folder that they weren't monitoring. And they were preparing to be articulating each other. And then he just picked up the phone and said, what's going on? And she was like, I didn't do that, send that email. And yeah, it's basically, you know, if it's not funding, it's to con you. Amount of times you get called from the tax office and even from a bank, there's this reverse calls. It gets me irritated, it gets a lot of people in the industry irritated, because the most important thing you could give away, and if you do your birth date on your email, Gmail, please change that. Your birth date's pretty important, because I can take your mobile phone number just for your birthday, knowing your first name and last name, right? So if that birth date's available to anyone, and I ring up and just say I'm the tax office, I need to validate you, and I don't have any details of you, but I know your first name and last name, please give me your date of birth. Please give me XYZ, your address. And all presumers will go, yep. They're not going to kind of pre-tell you the answer. So all you've done then is you've just populated their database of information that should be pretty personal and identifiable information. So they call it PII, personally identifiable information. And that's what the attackers are after. So if you ever get a phone call, it's a quick tip, and they ask for your number, say, no, I'm not going to give it to you over the phone. Give me a call center number that I can call you back on, and I'll validate this call that way. And that way you know you go to a proper call center, you'll get routed. It's painful. I give up. I never do. If they're after me, they can either get me through a different channel than the phone. It's too hard. And I've been in situations where I've heard people get rather upset by that because they take their sensitivity around their security and asking those questions quite seriously. The issue you have is that banks have done cybersecurity really well in some areas, but just some areas they haven't. And in this area where they ring you and they do that reverse check on you, that's one area that they still need to improve on for different reasons. Yep, so they're profiling the company, they're targeted emails, and they're sent to the individuals. And they are actually the highest rating of all instances of data breaches. So a phishing exercise nets between, out of all cases, when you do sampling around these sorts of breaches, things like SQL injections, which are breaking the web application to get access to the data, or firewall or penetration through some other means, the email is 70 to 80% of the methods used to gain access to a corporate infrastructure. There was a recent breach called PageUp. It was basically, if you ever apply for a job through Qantas, Australia Post, David Jones, they all run this job boards on their websites, but it's actually powered by this group called PageUp. And they're basically collecting all your resumes, they're advertising their jobs and all that on behalf of these bigger conglomerates. They've outsourced their HR process. And that small company didn't have and doesn't have, because of their size and scale, the same level of security posture that, say, a big multinational does. So they were targeted for a phishing campaign. They were able to install malware on their network computer, on an admin computer or on someone's computer that was part of the IT group, and they were able to gain access to that network and actually extrapolate all the resumes and CVs. And so there was a lot of people upset by that. And there's actually, right now, there's a class action suit from those that were impacted suing PageUp, and it's going, right at this moment, it's going through that process. So we talked about this, talked about spear phishing, and we did the video. The other areas is SMS phishing. So this has happened to our family personally. No one gets that, even though I'm in cybersecurity, doesn't mean my father-in-law can't still click on an SMS link, give their passwords away, and have my wife ringing the bank frantically 5 minutes later trying to undo everything. So there is that. These basically, what they do is the link on your phone will go to a phony website which asks you, and their social engineering, the way they engineered is they were actually in the bank that day. So the old generation get very worried. Well, and the email was, well, the SMS was, if you don't change your password now, your bank account will be locked. And the older generation are kind of very nervous. I need access to my bank account, not thinking that these things can be unlocked in a phone call, etc., etc. So they clicked on a link and they entered it. They rang my wife later quite coyly. They weren't getting to the point. They're talking about SMS and they know what we're in, and we talk to them all the time. We do a lot of work with e-safety in the government about how to protect yourself online from abuse and technology-related incidents. And then my wife goes to me, to her father, just tell me, did you click on the link? Because I know that we would have given them that. Why did you click on the link for this? But I don't think she did. She just said, I'm hanging up now, I'm ringing up the bank. And she was fortunate, she was able to get in time to the bank, but she had to prove she was a daughter, and there's almost social engineering on that as well. So anyway, around in circles. So be careful of voice and SMS phishing. Ransomware, who knows ransomware, what that is? Okay, ransomware was like a hot topic like 2 years ago. It was crippling organisations left, right and centre. Very simple concept. They will find an exploit in your organisation's computer. Usually Microsoft has a weak spot. They'll exploit that. Might require a user to click on a link, and all of a sudden it basically does encrypts all your files and your photos. It's very easy to do. It's usually designed to exploit your curiosity. And at the end, they want some sort of financial reward to give you the key to unlock your computer, because basically it does that. It shreds everything in your computer, makes it unusable. And you can't undo that. It's gone. They have the key. They'll give you instructions on how you can contact them. I mean, this is someone going to a website, and then they kind of sorry, my bad. They're on their computer. They go to a website. This packing slip by Australia Post are quite common. You've received a package. People go, yeah, I did buy some stuff. I didn't buy some stuff. My wife bought some stuff. I can't remember. So they click on the link, and the next thing they know, this appears on their screen. That's basically a real snapshot, and it's basically 71 hours left, and that's the ransom, right? That's the ransom left by the ransomware person. And they get smarter. They don't just stop with your computer. They know how to connect to the next computer and the next computer and the next computer inside your organisation. They realise you're connected to a shared drive, you're connected to some other drive, and they shred them all. And unless you're quick enough to kind of get in there and start unplugging things, organisations are usually at the mercy of the ransomware. Lots happened since then, because that took a lot of the industry by storm, and there's a lot of mitigation around that, because it's quite easy to kind of intercept, because these sort of emails have kind of got signatures now. And what a lot of the technology is doing is sandboxing that and clicking the link in a safe environment for you, seeing what happens to that. Is it doing anything suspicious or in specifically that it shouldn't be doing? If it is, it quarantines and says this is potentially ransomware. If it passes those heuristic tests, it's fine. It's probably a good email. Might still be a ransomware, but it's pretty much shut that industry down by a long shot. And then there's also purporting from the AFP. If you've got a speeding fine or unpaid ticket, you get very nervous and you kind of think, well, I better click on that, I better pay that, and there's means to pay that, and cryptocurrency. So Bitcoin, by the way, went through the roof because of that nature, right? So it was a very good underground, untraceable currency. Links. So links, again, lots of ways they do work with links. They basically hide the true destination. They basically could point to a hacked landing page where they've done something on that landing page that can steal your data or compromise your computer. I actually got done on, I'll admit it, I got done on a domain name that was misspelt. And I got to the point where it actually, they didn't do a very good integration job between the booking system where I was about to put my credit card that the system failed them. And that one there in that case was me knowing I needed to travel to Melbourne. I've been putting off getting my flight booked. I get daily emails from Jetstar and Virgin, all of them, but I don't ever read them. And that one morning I got in early and I just said, I'm going to just book this now. I didn't even check the email or anything. I trusted it. The whole site looked legitimate. Book your destination, book your time, select your calendar dates, select your seating. And then when it came to credit card, it just spun around in a circle, like that spinning wheel of death. And I just thought it was Jetstar being overloaded, so I closed my browser. I'll do it again, right? And at the third attempt, when I realised that it's not Jetstar being overloaded through some fantastic sale that wasn't going on, I actually looked at the URL more closely. That is getting harder and harder to do because marketing agencies now are shortening them or using third-party agencies that are still legitimate but not part of ANZ Bank or not part of CBA Bank. So kind of even trying to look at the link and go, is it real or not? Hard, real hard. There's that link example. Passwords are everywhere, and this is essentially my view on, or it's in a presentation because mostly people have poor practice around passwords, right? So if you look at the word football, you know, there's a probability of deciphering that in an attack for a brute force is the time frame is instant. Basically, there's not even a factor of time involved in that. If you look at something completely random, you can see that it's going to take 41 trillion years to kind of try and brute force or decipher that password. How can you remember football versus a random string that has nothing to do with anything? Lots of people have different techniques, but sometimes just putting phrases together, you know, Jack and Jill went up the hill, with number 1 at the end, you can't remember that. But I think nowadays, even that's no good. You need to get a password manager. So 1Password is the one that I use. And when I use that and I look at it, I'm just scared of how many passwords I got. I think I've cracked 1,000. So there's no way I could remember all of them. So another thing about passwords is you want to try and not reuse them. There's always I'll talk about whether you do or don't, but in my view, if you want to reuse passwords, it's perfectly fine if you're not worried about if it's compromised, what's going to happen behind that. So for example, new subscriptions or things I might subscribe to, mailing lists that require passwords to change or something, I'll just use something that's common across that. And I know that if that gets breached, the information that they're going to get to is not personally identifiable back to me. My bank account password for my banking is the only 1Password that's different from every other password I have, right? And then you kind of go from that scale of banking right down to I don't care, and you have some sort of random mixture in there. So reuse is not bad. My 8-year-old was asking me one time, she was 9 I think, I had my password safe open and I'd forgotten a password, and she goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm looking for a password. She says, oh, I've got an easy solution for that. I've got a very easy solution for that. She's very literate, computer literate, had a computer probably since kindergarten, born with it. And I go, all right, honey, what's your key to your password management scenario? Oh, it's simple. I use 1Password for everything, right? So, and that's it. She does, and she's 8 or 9. And then my oldest, who's in high school, would say, oh, Dad, I put my, and to a degree, even my wife, we're not all perfect, I put my passwords in a Word doc on Google, okay? So, I mean, it's open, it's plain text. So the moral of that story is look for a password manager that you can put, easily integrates into your browser, easily integrates onto your mobile device, so you're not encumbered by security as getting to your favorite website or doing something that you like to do because of a password. So that's why I have passwords up in the presentation. If you add a secondary factor, so a lot of these banks now send out random codes. Probably didn't dive far back into my history enough, but I am a software developer. 20 years ago. I'm pretty much to blame for the reason why you get SMS text codes in a one-word passcode. I apologise. They said it will only last 3 years. It's still going. So that's one of the areas that I was very passionate about. And something like football is great. I don't even know who wrote that, but yeah, 204 million years. But it's up to you. Take some tips from that, or leave that where it is, however you like. And some links. How secure is my password.net is probably the one you want to do, but don't use your password in there, just play around with it. Again, you can never trust who's seeing that, what you're doing in there. Yeah, so your personal identifying information is worth protecting. This is what I touched on earlier. It's anything that can identify you, gender, birth date, name, address, all those sorts of things. And now companies can face huge fines if you have a disclosure, which is the first thing in Australia. It was launched 22nd of February 2017. So it's very new. So companies now, if they do suffer a data breach and it has a reasonable impact on your personal information, they can get fined up to, it's around about $3 million in damages. It's still not a lot, but it's at least trying to push organisations into more caring and protecting your data. They issue a quarterly report. It's all freedom of information. You can go on there and check and see how many organisations disclosed. But in January 18th, 90 organisations disclosed have been breached. This is Australian organisations, Australian companies. So we haven't read about them in the paper, but you can go online and find out who they are through this website, because they have to manage and disclose. Goes into sectors, if you care about the industry sectors and what specifically they were focusing on. Credentials, there you go. Stolen credentials was 34%. Brute force attacks, 14. Phishing comprised of 29. Ransomware in that case was, what's that number? 44%? Yeah. So anyway, that's changing every quarter because they report that quarterly. The leading sectors that are hacked the most in Australia, top 5 industries. All right, so healthcare, very interesting to get your health information about you. It's quite valuable. The logistics that when the hackers steal a hot trove of credit card numbers, it goes on the dark web, goes on Pastebin, goes into some sort of underground forum. They equated those to be about, when they onsell them, about $1 per record. That's the value they put on that data of a credit card. Healthcare records at the moment in those dark web undergrounds are probably hovering around $20. So it's a lot more value to a hacker or to someone that's trying to, claim themselves to be you. And by the way, once they do that, it's very hard to undo. And this is the spiel that we give to the corporates in terms of the big end of the kind of senior managers and the directors in companies. You have to have a cyber-aware culture. It's no good just putting a control in it if everyone can just go around it. All right? So you have to basically have something in place that everyone's on board with. It's actually at the level that is, we're just kind of compensatable to the level of security and data that you're protecting. If you're doing a newsletter and you're just, well, I can't even say that now. If you've got an email address, you've got to protect it now. So if you're a student body here and you're running a student council and you're running a newsletter and you're collecting 3,000 email addresses, you have to protect that. Otherwise, if that database becomes known, you put it on your laptop on an Excel spreadsheet, USB stick, lose it, that's 3,000 emails that are out that you might have to kind of report as a breach. So that's kind of like the down and dump stuff, but yeah, just be alert, I guess. Be more mindful of what you're clicking on. Be mindful about people that are calling you. Be mindful about, potentially giving up information to, unwilling, people that are out there. So it's out there. I mean, it's basically olden day scams, just reinvented for a virtual world. So there's nothing really so fanciful about it. The only thing that it actually has got mass scale. They can propagate it quite easily, quite quickly because it's cheap. It's cheap sending an email, right? and it feels like no one's getting harmed because there's an anonymity between the attacker and the person. I don't know them. I'm not actually hitting them over the head with a bat and taking their wallet out of their back pocket. So that sense of psychological, brain that's kind of, they're reconciling with, it doesn't exist. They think they can just click away, send out the emails, and do that. And it's also economical because countries that are less fortunate are struggling. We're very fortunate in Australia. We've got great universities, we've got great students, we've got a great career path, great job prospects, great startup prospects, incubator, innovation, etc. There's countries that just don't have that. And they'll sit in a cafe and scam people on eBay for a $20 fake watch, and it's out there, so you've got to be careful. So it's just olden day scams reinvented for a new world. If you see a breach or you become aware of something, you tell people. And that's what I'm just saying. Just be trusting. I'm going to finish up before I go to another video. I don't know, I'm going for time. I've got time for a video. Anyone want to just kind of pop quiz me or got any questions about anything that's either up there or something that you're curious about cybersecurity? You want to test me anything? Go for it. Anyone? There's t-shirts, yeah. Far away.
How do hackers monetize something like your health record?
I think
is there a black market for that somewhere?
there is, and I think the whole point behind, there's this whole, the government just recently launched eHealth, which is basically supposed to, a big issue that we have is, and my father had experienced this very thing, if you go to one hospital, you get a file that big and it stays in that hospital, right? So you can't move across to another hospital. If there's an emergency, they've got to physically transfer those records. But when someone's dying of a heart attack, you need that immediate access to that data. There's a very good business case to have digitized records in those cases. Is there value in knowing that my dad had an enlarged aorta? Maybe not him as an individual. Is there value in his, they can look at it from perspective of in healthcare, and I'm not going to say that pharmaceutical companies are unethical, but they can kind of profile what medication you're on, and then they can kind of try and target you with a different kind of medication. It doesn't happen so much in Australia because we are prescribed through, we don't actually ask our pharmacist to prescribe us or our doctor prescribes towards us. So it's less likely that that's the issue. I think in Australia it's not a big issue as in America where they kind of want to know and try and target you. It's probably so dark that it's like if they know your Facebook ads might change, if you're looking at prosthetics, they might start putting ads to a company for around prosthetics. There's a lot of dark marketing web companies that will use dark web black marketing tactics to get ad revenue for their tactics as well. And Facebook is just a medium. You can't say it's Facebook's fault, but they might be buying that data, right? And trying to sell.
Legitimate businesses who have some kind of connection to the illegitimate tactics.
Look, I don't know if, it's a line, isn't it? Because when does a legitimate business shouldn't really be working with an illegitimate business for that nature because they've crossed a line and they just become unethical, right? But it's probably happening, and it's probably happening not even at the knowledge of the board that are probably doing that. It's probably some internal person that's looking at ways to boost their own, quarterly bonus, or ways to kind of make more of a dent on what they're doing in their role, and they're working out ways to do that, and they might engage with some data that's they shouldn't really get access to further that cause. But again, it's about really identity theft. It's about the more information I can have on you to build a better profile picture of you. That's what it is, and then the video will probably show a bit more about that.
I'm not sure if this is a very big question, but it's which countries tend to, in a more global scale, which countries tend to have the most cases of hacking?
As in being hacked or actually perpetrating from?
A bit of both, actually.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of it's the whole US versus the world, and it's we're a very close ally to the US, especially in defense. There was recently, they always say China. It's kind of like the standard response. But Chinese can have a VPN coming out of the US and look like it's a US as well. So I don't know that they can actually pinpoint which country is doing the most hacking. I think what they can pinpoint is that which ones are most incentivized to do state-based hacking. Basically, which countries will benefit the most from knowing secrets, and that's what we're protecting. And both the Australian Parliament just recently announced that they stopped an attack. I don't think back to China, but there's no saying. And Australia also admitted to being on the offence. That's what we call offensive. So when you're getting into that state-based cybersecurity or cyber warfare, that's when they start looking at retaliation. And that's happening now in Iran and Turkey and all those sort of Middle Eastern countries. But I think everyone at the end of the day, South, North Korea, China, Estonia, Russia, everyone. Like I'm not gonna give it a number one rating to any of them. I think they're all involved. It's the one that's the most, it's a political system as well. So, a lot of the other countries are incentivized because they have military workforces where the students must, through conscription, go through those in serve time in the army for 1 or 2 years. And a lot of them want to work in IT, and a lot of them like to work in cybercrime, and they need to build a cyber army. We in Australia don't have that level of capability. Like, we need more talent in cyber, and that's one of the things that I didn't touch on, which is our cyber skill shortage. And that's also an issue between how do you get those that are very new upskilled very quickly, and on the other side, how do you get those that are hiring or employing accepting people with less skill or less qualification into those roles. So, yeah. Did you get a t-shirt? Yeah? T-shirt tops. Any others?
Like, one of the biggest challenges for organizations in terms of cybersecurity is having their entire cohort of staff knowledgeable about the implications.
Yep.
Like, in terms of even the basics of really basic password management, like not having it on a screen next to the monitor and that kind of stuff. That's one of the biggest.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think at the end of the day, it's like I've seen generations. I'm a Gen X, so I've seen Gen Y and now millennial. My daughters haven't seen a cassette player. They probably don't know what a VHS is. I've been around since beta days. I know what, I've been around for a long time. So the current generation just expects everything to be secure, right? You just use it, and that should be the way it is. But there's a whole lot of an older generation as well that, they don't really feel they need to be in any way aware of cybersecurity. They didn't worry about security. They kind of knew they lock their house and they leave for work and they come back. They weren't worried about security. But as even that generation becomes more tapped into, I was on the weekend watching my 75-year-old father-in-law doing things on the iPhone that my father never would have touched, right? He was enlarging, cropping, turning, flipping, switching, and he's got a PIN code on his phone. So for him, that's kind of taught security, right? But you have to be taught that. So unless someone's willing to say, hey, if you don't put a PIN code on your phone, you might leave it somewhere. Someone's going to get all the photos of your daughter and see who you've called or your text messages. So that conversation has to be had. So there's no intrinsic knowledge around that. We have very stern conversations with my father-in-law. He's very Facebook active. And he loves to post photos of my daughters and stuff like that. And we say just be careful because a lot of that information gets out there and sometimes to the wrong people. Yeah. Anyone else? Oh, did you get a shirt?
So, just explain the last point of the good practice. Do not attempt to stop an attack on your own.
No, yeah, that's a good one.
For a developing country's perspective, what can be done?
Yeah, that's a funny one. I think that's come from a story where you need to kind of tell people that you feel an attack's underway, and how you even know that is kind of tricky. But that came from a funny story where the way to respond to an attack that was going on is that individual just decided to walk up to the whole switch in the cabinet and just pull everything out. Because they thought if I pull out all the cables, I can thwart this attack. But what they didn't know is the attack probably wasn't a real attack, and they probably just shut down their business for I don't know, 8 hours or something of recovery. So it was more like talk to someone. Does this look right? Let's talk for the next step of actions. Don't just go out there on your own and be that superhero and just grab the cables and pull them all out because you think that's the way you're going to stop a cyber attack. don't know if there was Wi-Fi maybe as well, but so that's kind of like the kind of gist of that one. Developing countries, I've got it's steps to come for them as well. They have a lot of, our banking system is very robust. We have very good encryption between our communications. Our telecommunication providers are very well connected using encryption technologies between all the endpoints. But if you go to somewhere like Papua New Guinea, plain text everything, even between your banking. So even though you can do good practice, telecommunication providers are so far behind that they can't encrypt it. And you can't trust the government that they aren't putting an endpoint in there and just socking out the information as well. So there's other challenges in those regions as well. So, which is an interesting one.
Regarding the suspicious link and untrusted website, could you please like for example, while we used to work in the link that it will open, like unsafe link it will open, and like for instance, while we search for any journal paper in the website in the PC, the link will open that it is dangerous or like it's unsafe.
Yeah.
So can we say that suspicious link or untrusted website? If that link will come.
Oh, if it's unsafe, if you get a link that says the link is unsafe.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think, so let me talk to you about Untrusted. So Facebook's a trusted website. We trust Facebook to kind of do the right thing by us and our security. If you go to some dark web website, we don't know much about that website. So this is in a corporate lounge, we try to encourage people to only use websites that have a sense of, is it a government website, is it a banking website? Because they've got roles, they only need to kind of visit so many roles. There is personal time, you don't want to take away personal time from scouring the web, but if you are doing personal time and scouring the web, you've still got to keep within a certain boundary of it's Google Gmail or it's Yahoo, so they're kind of trusted websites. Anything that doesn't have a name to it in our mindset is untrusted, unknown to us, and they'll get blocked. So a lot of corporations will say, don't know what these websites are, we'll block them at the firewall or the web proxy, right? So that you won't even get to those. The suspicious link is more along the lines of the link itself looks unusually strange, like it's long or the web doesn't say Facebook in there. That looks suspicious, right? So don't click on it. There are now, with depending on who you're connecting through, or your organisation, the university or whatnot, they do have ability to do heuristics, and they'll do checkpoints against a known database of bad, suspicious websites, and it'll show you a website saying, suspicious, not going to allow you to visit that, you're blocked, right? Because they kind of know that somewhere, because there's a lot of data being collected, someone on that website has been attacked, someone's reported it, and it's gone on a global database. So they're kind of keeping that, like it's like a global AV for website URLs, kind of protects them through that way, in that regard. So.
Think about this cross application authentication, just like social networks, authentication, developers using this Facebook or Google to make the authentication. So
token-based authentication. It's a very new thing. It's quite valid. I think what they're trying to do is they're just trying to make it easier for you to connect to and start utilising their service. And for you, you don't have to remember another password, another username, etc. So what they're really doing is that organisation A has a relationship with Facebook through the back-end API infrastructure. Your actual credentials are with Facebook, right? So Facebook is responsible for storing your username and password. They only know it. They don't know it because it's hashed, but they're the gatekeeper for your password. This organisation says, hey, I've got this person coming in. Are they a valid person in your organisation? Yes or no? And if they are, then they'll basically give that website A token, right? And that token is not your username and password, but that gives you ability to kind of go in as if you had provided a username and password. It also de-risks this organisation because there's no password or username to breach because it all sits inside Facebook. So it's a good way for other organisations that say, I don't want to really take care of passwords and usernames because they get breached, I'm in trouble, I'll use tokens. And tokens only have a set life of, like, you can set them for as long as 5 minutes or 5 days, depending on that. So it's quite a legitimate way to go about doing it. I don't think there's nothing wrong with it. The only thing I'd worry about that is read very carefully, especially when you download apps, read very carefully about what it's getting access to. So sometimes more along the lines, when you sign up for some of these things, I say, I want your contacts, I want your camera roll, I want your, and the app's got nothing to do with that, right? So you kind of got to be careful, read the, what am I agreeing to allow this app to use on my phone, right? A lot of people just skip through that. They say the biggest lie on the internet is terms and conditions. because everyone just clicks yes. No one ever reads the terms and conditions. Have I read terms and conditions? Yes. So it's the biggest lie on the internet. Sorry, I didn't get that.
Using different process, sometimes we use to address website. We do some kind of bits and process to address any kind of website.
Okay.
So can this thing lead to any kind of package?
Not too sure. Not come across that. So you're using something.
Some kind of register or something.
Yeah, no. We'll talk about it a bit offline, but I'm not too sure about that one. Come see me afterwards. I want to hear what that is.
So you mentioned encryption. It's quite important. What's your view on encryption in this country when the government wants
Oof, there we go.
to introduce back to the door?
Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? It's really stuffed up a lot of businesses in Australia. A lot of good companies are now losing funding, and it's just basically created a whole sense of mistrust. If you've got a business that solely relies on encryption as your model, even if you're using a very encrypted mailing service where everything's encrypted, yeah, that's a real negative. That's a real blight on what the government's introduced there. ACES very much has a position on that. We very much said that the government should have consulted with industry experts. They didn't. I've personally spoken with politicians about why that was introduced. A bit of backstory: pre-Christmas, there was Labor and Liberal were tossing back and forth about getting this passed in Parliament before the break. Liberal wanted to pass this bill. Labor opposed it. They had intel that there was a very serious threat that was going to happen over Christmas, and they needed to rush the bill through. Labor got scared that if that threat happened and they blocked the bill, that the finger would be pointed at them for reasoning why they blocked it. The Liberal Party said, sign here, we'll revisit in February and we'll undo all those things. Doesn't happen, right? So it's still there. And we've had the election since then, and I don't know if they'll loosen that. It's got a lot of people worried, especially those that are in businesses, because they can literally come in and tap you on the shoulder and say, you will do this on our behalf, and you can't even tell your wife, partner or girlfriend, boyfriend or otherwise, that you need to perform this on our behalf. If you refuse to do it, you go to jail. And I think that's the biggest blight on that whole bill around that, is that it's not about the fact that we get backdoor introducing real vulnerabilities into software. They can't really kind of tell that I'm only going to get this one person I'm interested in. You're going to get a whole window of people. And there's other things, because the people that are signing off on it are detached from the technology, they're detached from the retired judges and so forth. We're told otherwise. They've yet to use that power, but time will tell on that one. It's good pick up. All right, so you're going to come across cyber in one way or another. It's a broad industry. One up top.
So what about two-factor authentication? Since you said passwords can be vulnerable at times, so will two-factor authentication come into play? Can be more secure than the passwords?
Yeah, it's not a silver bullet. It's definitely a recommendation on all things, especially email. If you've got cloud-based services in email, it will stop an attack pretty much instantly. The difference is it is defeatable. It's not undefeatable. It comes back to, I can port your SMS phone number with your mobile, with your password, with your date of birth and your name, first name and last name. I can steal your SMS number and I can get the code sent to me. So it's not infallible, but it is a good step towards stopping it. It's mandatory. I mean, it's something that it's less inconvenient than it used to be. Our network carriers are faster at delivering tokens to phones than they used to be. And now you've got on-phone generators that are generating inside the app time-based passwords as well. So it's a thumbs up. I mean, you got to turn it on. If you're using Gmail or even Outlook or anything like that, turn on multi-factor authentication. All right. All right. I'll show this one video. One more. No.
How reliable is that password managed?
1Password. So 1Password is. I get this conversation a lot, and it's hard to say because nothing is impenetrable, right? Nothing at the end of the day, somewhere along the lines there'll be some weakness introduced, whether it's through oversight or whether it's through a patch that didn't go right according to plan, whether it's through human error or whatever, it does rely on algorithms and cryptography to encrypt your password safe and so forth. If they break encryption, then everything's open. Like, it's not even your password safe that's the concern there. So I feel that to kind of exist, we have to take some leap of faith somewhere and know that I'm going to block out 99% of those low-hanging fruit that might be a problem for me. But at the end of the day, if encryption gets broken through quantum computing and all the rest of it that's around the horizon, then not even one password is going to help you. They'll just decipher your transmission.
For the password manager system, like there's we can use one password for a paid one, right? And there is
the free one, yeah.
The open source.
Yep.
So which one is the most stronger?
So a lot of good things in open source. PGP, open source has got a very strong community. And as long as it's got a lot of numbers of users, you go by trust on the number of the community and a number of volunteers and contributors, right? If it's one person that's a contributor to an open source and cryptography project, you kind of go, I don't know. But if there's 12 to 20 contributors, like Red Hat, for example, right? Sold $1 billion for IBM, completely open source operating system, Linux. So the benefit you get out of that open source side of that is you get good people reviewing that code. Like OpenSSL had a vulnerability, and that wasn't intentional, but good people got onto it straight away and closed it down, right? So the open source community is very good, very strong.
We get most of the untrusted links from the website, like Facebook, Twitter, something like that. Why can't we be able to stop it at the application level? Why is it difficult?
It does. There are technologies to stop it. Just depends on what organisation you're in. So inside an organisation, they can control their perimeter, right? And they can put controls in place that force all your web traffic in and out of one particular proxy, and it's doing, checks against suspicious links, checks against bad websites, etc. But when you get out of that environment and you come onto your phone, you're just relying on the telco to kind of give you that trust. And telco is an open pipe. There's no control. You'd have to kind of subscribe yourself personally to some service to route your internet traffic through. As an individual, it probably doesn't justify it in the cost, but for a corporate, which has got thousands of users that like to click on lots of things, and that's the biggest risk for them, putting that control in place is definitely a plus at the application level, checking that out through them.